Hey everyone, welcome to the Doom Scroll Club. Today we are talking about just kidding. We're talking about assassination. We're talking about assassinations, protests, and impending World War III. We are here to talk about all the things that are driving us crazy, and it feels like each week it's getting worse and worse. So we are here to be your companions because doom scrolling is funner with friends. I'm Calvin.
Cody.
Welcome to the DSC. Cody, what are we talking about today?
Yeah. So just, kind of like you already mentioned, the U.S. airstrikes on Iranian nuclear facilities, the No King's Day protest, which was a pretty big little event there, the assassination of Minnesota lawmaker Melissa Hortman and all that fiasco, and then the Supreme Court ruling on gender-affirming care, and had to do with like for minors so far. So those are just some of the things that we're gonna go over, give our uneducated opinions on, and go from there. So, the latest thing. Do you want to just start with that since it's literally happened like yesterday?
Yeah, less than 24 hours ago. Yeah, let's start with the fact that it looks like we are going into potentially World War III.
Right, which is not anxiety provoking at all. But so just to give, unless you're living under a rock, but just to give a little overview. Trump announced the U.S. Air Force strikes on Iran's nuclear sites, so escalating the Iran-Israel conflict after Israel's own strikes. Iran retaliated with missiles on Tel Aviv, and over 220 died in Israeli strikes on Iran. As PM, Modi called for calm, but fears of a wider war are spiking. So right now, there was like a lead up to this potentially happening, and it was kind of like we were left hanging. Are we going to do something? Are we not? And even, Trump's base is pretty split on, because he campaigned off of peace and no new wars and has been pretty vocal about, this being something Obama was going to do when he got into office, et cetera, et cetera. And now he's the one that's, potentially starting wars. And so, I always wondered what it would take for, a good chunk of his base to kind of wake up a little and be like, hey, that's not what I voted for. And, finally got there and saw quite a bit of people, going against him on this whole potential war thing. So that was and is still entertaining to kind of read on X and stuff. But as far as like my own opinion goes, this is definitely not something that I think the majority of people do not want this. He's trying to say, oh, it's like a one and done situation. We did what we needed to do. We're not doing anything else. We're not at war with Iran. We're just at war with their nuclear program. And I'm just like, I don't think it works that way. So yeah, that would be great. That'd fantastic. But
Yeah, you can't strike a country and then say time for peace. Like that's not how it works.
Like, who drops bombs and is like, time for peace? Like, what the fuck? So yeah, what do you
This
think
isn't
about
tag.
it
I'm just. I mean, I'd like to say I'm surprised. I'm not. I definitely. This was a major fear. I think the first time Trump was elected. He's just not someone who he talks a big game, but he's not a smart guy. He's very impulsive. He makes quick decisions, and usually they're decisions based off of his ego and not really about fact or consequences. So this was something that I thought was going to happen last time, and I was really relieved when he wasn't reelected, and it seemed like things were gonna calm down, and we were gonna start to fix the damage that he caused last time. And this time we're not even 6 months into this term, and it's looking bad. So I mean, there's a lot of nuance, I think, that goes on with this situation. Obviously, there's been tensions between Israel and Iran for a while. Obviously, we've been dealing with Gaza and the Palestinians, and what's been happening to them is just absolutely horrific. I I feel like, as Americans who have not been in war, we obviously we're not in the military, and won't be allowed to be in the military either. So,
Yeah, that's another thing.
yeah, but most Americans who have not been in war don't know what it's like, and it's easy to um it's easy to disconnect from the reality of what other people are going through in their everyday lives. I think, you look at people in Europe or in Great Britain who have been through war, World War II, or, recently more war in their actual home areas. They know what it's like to have bombs dropped on their homes or in the vicinity. We don't know that. We've been very sheltered. I won't say sheltered, but we've been very lucky in the fact that that hasn't been in our day to day lives. At least within the last couple generations. So now the thought of we've taken a step to where we've kind of gone against what is it, like war policies, or what the UN would go for, that puts a target on us. There's already talks of Iran possibly striking against the US. I hope it doesn't come to that. I hope things are able to calm down. But it's definitely something that we're like, especially living in a coastal state, closer to being targets. So that's definitely scary.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've had terrorist attacks, and that's about as close as to like home turf,
Yeah.
type of
Yeah.
stuff we've had since like the Civil War. I feel like, and Pearl Harbor, that was obviously
Yeah.
an attack. um, but yeah, we've not had things like the Middle East, everything over on the other side of the world. But we do have like the best military, so I feel like that's probably like we're always on the defense. We're always trying to. But I think the biggest issue too is that like it's not just fear of retaliation, of even being bombed or whatever. Like there's trade type situation, things that affect our economy, like gas prices going up, and then more inflation, and like Americans just cannot handle any more of that, because there's this I forget what it's called. So it's the Strait of Hormuz. I don't know how to pronounce it, but they have control over it, and they can like close off access to it, and that affects like the global economy, just not the U.S. But yeah, oil prices would go up exponentially if they ended up closing that. So now I Trump's supposedly trying to talk with China to try to talk Iran down on that front. But I'm like, we don't even have a great relationship with China, especially with these trade wars and all that. So it's almost just like Trump pissed off every world leader possible, and now is trying to like talk to them into not allowing Iran to fuck things up more. And I'm just like, I don't know how that's gonna go. Like if they close that up, we're so fucked.
Yeah. No one wants to help us.
No. So we'll see what happens there, but potentially that's where we're gonna feel the biggest impact, is if they retaliate to do that. Because I know that there's also We got cities and military bases on high alert because they did say they would retaliate. So that's where the whole thing of like, this isn't just one and done. They already said they were going to retaliate. So how are they going to? Or are they full of shit and they're trying to scare us? I don't know. But I also think Trump's full of shit in saying that this is just a one and done situation. Like, when has that ever been the case?
Yeah. It's definitely a domino effect. You can't just stop it once it starts, unfortunately.
No, no. So definitely a lot of people that are upset about it on both sides of things. We're kind of just in a wait and see what happens situation. And it's not a fun place to be in. Because it's just the unknown and the uncertainty. Like, we needed more of that in our lives. But yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, the probability of them striking us is I would say pretty low, because our defense is so strong, and because we are a lot further away from them. But it's not impossible. It definitely is a higher percentage probably now than it was, 24 hours ago. But I think, the biggest danger is obviously that's pushing us to sending our troops back out there, which we, spent a long time getting them out of Iraq. We've haven't really had, I don't know, it's putting more people's lives in danger that didn't need to be, and there's also American citizens that are, visiting these areas. So, what's going to happen to them? I've already seen a video from one of Trump's cabinet, and they were talking about how they're not specifically going to be offering like any aid to, American citizens over there that are trying to get back. They're just like, find your use your regular means to get back. So it's just a scary situation. Hopefully, hopefully something happens and, things don't go, any further than this, but it doesn't look like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you have to wonder, because we kind of lived through a situation like this back when Bush was president, right? We went to war due to thinking there was weapons of mass destruction. Turns out there was not. And now we're kind of in this situation with Iran where it's like, oh, do they have nuclear weapons? Are they trying to develop nuclear weapons? And there isn't really any like certainty with that either.
Well, yeah, I think just 8 weeks ago, Tulsi Gabbard talked to Congress and said that there was no weapons of mass destruction. Iran didn't have any like nuclear plans happening. Whatever happened in 8 weeks completely changed, what they were doing.
Yeah, because now she came out and said she agreed with what we did. So she kind of like flipped on that a little bit. So I don't know if there is like new intel that we just don't know about what happened, or if it was just really influenced by Israel wanting us to step in for whatever other reason that we don't know. And I think it's kind of frustrating, I think, especially for both sides, because we were just in this, conversation of, like, we're helping out Ukraine and we're, the right likes to, the America First situation where it's like, we're pulling out of Ukraine. We're not helping them anymore. We've already given them enough. America First. And then we like immediately go into another war. Is that America First? And then there's people arguing, yeah, because we don't want Iran having nuclear weapons. Of course, that's America first because we need to protect, ourselves, that sort of thing. But then it's like, well, if they don't have those, then are we just supporting Israel's whatever their motive is if that's not it? So it's like, what's the difference between helping Ukraine versus helping Israel? And why are we so willing to help one and not the other? And of course, there's the conspiracy theories about Israel having blackmail, and that has to do with the Epstein list. Apparently, they say that Epstein worked as like an Israeli spy or some shit like that, and there's blackmail on Trump and a lot of politicians with that whole sex trafficking ring, and that's why Israel has so much control. but I don't know. Like I said, there's conspiracy theorists and conspiracy theories just floating around like crazy because internet, right? Uh, and when you've got like Candace Owens, for example, she's all over that conspiracy
Mm.
theory amongst other people that are not just on the right, but also on the left. It's like that's where they come full circle. And It's interesting to see one of Trump's like most hardcore bases having turned on him. Candace kind of did it earlier. She hasn't really been for Trump, I feel like, since Elon hopped on board. I think that might have been a turning point for her. But Yeah, it's interesting to see, and it's interesting to see what that might mean for the rest of his presidency. I know a lot of people are up in arms too because you're supposed to need Congress to get permission to go to war, and I don't know if his loophole is that we're not going to war. Uh, but apparently, he briefed like Republican senators and Congress or whatever,
Mhm.
but he didn't brief the Democratic side of things, and like that's not good. If you're trying to like create less divide within the country, he's only making it worse. And it's just like I wish he would not. I wish he would actually focus on trying to lessen the divide in the country. I feel like that is America first because we're a fucking mess. That's all.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, and I think it's also, pretty disgusting when, you're looking at the genocide or the murder of hundreds of thousands of Gazans, and people starving, children starving, and Trump is talking about the real estate possibilities with the area.
Yeah.
It just shows that his motivation is always financial and power, and it's he has no empathy for human life, which is really terrifying for someone who's our commander in chief.
Yeah. And not only does like he not have empathy, uh, I mean, I don't think he's capable because he's a narcissist and they just aren't. But he can't even relate to the average American, which I find the most crazy thing of him being elected. It's like, oh yeah, they elected him because he's not the deep state, he's not an elite, and he's gonna make changes. And it's just like this dude was born rich, and everything has been handed to him. Like, has he even ever stepped foot in a grocery store? Has he ever done the things that an average American has had to do? Or it's just like we couldn't have picked a more clueless president. Uh, like, you can't care about things that, I mean, you can, but he's not going to care about things he's never like had to go through or
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah, he's never had to, figure out if he has enough, gas money to get to work. If
No.
he's got enough bread or milk in the fridge to feed him or his family. Like, he's never had to struggle.
No.
And so, it's like, yeah, he doesn't know what the average American goes through, and without that knowledge or empathy, like, he's never going to be for the average American.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the biggest thing too is like, I can't, it's like, why can't the Republican Party pick a better candidate? I feel like even in the case that, there was a public Republican president, and of course, there's always things that both parties disagree on, but there's no more like, he is the most divisive president that we could ever have. And a lot of like their side says Obama was the most divisive president. I'm like, why? Because he's black, like that. Um, so it's just like when everything that Trump does is out of retaliation, tell me how that's not just constantly divisive. He purposefully trolls the American people. And as funny as that might be to his base, that's not how you move forward. That's not how you make progress. That's not how you work together. Um, the whole thing just lacks empathy, and it dehumanizes everyone that is on the other side of the spectrum of things. And I feel like even when there was, yeah, like pre-Trump, people were at least like kinder or
Yeah.
understanding of other people's different opinions, and now it is just like cutthroat. It's like,
Yeah. It's
no,
cool to be mean, which
yeah,
is, it's ridiculous.
yeah, yeah. There's a lot of like rage bait content creators that just
Hmm.
like put out rage to cause more divide. There's bots that are purposely created to create more divide. I'm like, damn, that's the biggest attack on American soil right now, is just through the internet and dividing the American people so that we're weaker, you know? Anyways, that was kind of a tangent.
No, I mean, this is probably, obviously this happened less than 24 hours ago. And so it's still kind of a whiplash effect where like it's, right now it's kind of like jumping to, the worst case scenario of like, oh, great, it's going to be World War III or whatever. I mean, that definitely is heading into that possibility, of course, but it hasn't been enough time for it fully to like sink in and be like, okay, this is what's happening. This is, and we don't know what's going to happen. So it's a scary time.
Yeah, for sure. So, now that we went over the airstrike situation, do you want to talk about the No King's Day protests and, people that are in California? We have like a California perspective, but we're not in it because we're in the northern part of it. So a lot of it has, been around LA. I mean, there's been protests all over the world, but it all started basically in LA with ICE going in there and ripping people's families apart because they're showing up at like court hearings for immigration, which is fucked up. They're showing up at people's work, any kind of function that they can. And, you see videos of people, you know, like mothers or fathers being deported, and then their kid is just like left. And it's just like, who the fuck does that? Because I thought, they were focused on removing criminals from, illegal criminal, immigration, whatever. But instead, it seems like they're focusing on people who don't have criminal history. Maybe they're not necessarily here legally, but they're also not causing any problems. And that's pretty sad.
Well, they're even going after people who have been coming legally. They're revoking status on people who have gone through the process. So it's not a it's definitely not just we're going after people who are criminals. It's just we're just going to go after people who are in minorities or from different countries or whatever their target is. But it's not what they're claiming it to be. And they're just doing it in brutal ways, which I understand the aspect. If you're an ICE agent, wanting to protect your identity, because you don't want someone to target you or your family, but also like that's what our police are. Our police don't get to protect their identity. They have to go out and, do justice or whatever. So why is ICE being held to a different standard to where they're able to conceal their identity? They're able to grab people without having to have a warrant or show identification or be in unmarked cars. And it is putting a situation where there are, people pretending to be ICE, harassing people. And it's just disgusting. I don't know. I've never understood how people can think that, scaring someone or harming someone is fun or entertainment. And we're seeing, I think, just a couple days ago, ICE agents were posted outside of Disneyland, and who knows if it's, them trying to get employees or if they're trying to get people coming in to visit. But it's, this, eh, I don't know. I'm hating this place even more and more every single day.
Yeah. And like people argue, oh, Obama, he um what's it called? He deported more people than Trump, or Biden deported more people than Trump. Like, yeah, that was how many years? Like, Obama was in office for 8 and Biden 4. But, that whole 4 years, Trump's been in there for 6 months. So, of course, Obama deported more. But it's not just like he's trying to deport more people in like a crazy ass short amount of time. And that's what causes the chaos. So it's not about the number, it's about the approach. And he's just creating chaos and havoc. And like that's his style. It's been chaos ever since he took office. And so it's like he's supposed to be, they were like campaigning off of being the president or the administration of transparency, and they have been like the least transparent, even not even being clear about whether we're going to do something with Iran. And he says, oh, we'll know in about 2 weeks. And then like 2 days later, oh yeah, we bombed their nuclear sites. Peace.
Yeah.
It's time for peace. And it's just like, cool. You know, you did not do what you said you're going to do. But the, the whole thing with the ICE agents, of course, it creates this distrust in the government, even more distrust in, authority, even if it's just police officers who are not necessarily, doing the things that ICE are doing or whatever. I think they even showed up at a Dodger game, but LAPD escorted ICE out, was like, fuck you guys. Like, what are you doing? Stop.
Yeah.
Like, they're all family events. And it's just like, it's just not the place. Why can't you wait or do something else? But also, are the people here you're trying to detain, are they a problem? Have they are they criminals? Have they done illegal shit besides like maybe entering the country illegal? I don't know. But that was where so Trump decided to deploy the National Guard to California, and that's supposed to only be the governor is supposed to be the one. Like, he's supposed to have to like discuss it with the governor first, and governor has to give approval, but he didn't do that. And so there's been this like all out kind of war between Gavin Newsom and Trump. And I can't say I love Newsom, but at the same time, I don't know. It's fucking hard because it's like California is a rough place to live. It's expensive as hell. Our cities have become quite a mess. We've got a lot of, homelessness and stuff like that. But we also, the cost of living is insane. Gas prices, housing prices, everything here is exponentially more expensive. How we fix that, I don't know. But, I can't say he's done a great job with doing anything in that realm. But he's, spoken up for, well, kind of. He's spoken up for trans rights, and kept our healthcare intact, or at least is trying to say that we're gonna keep it and stuff like that. But outside of that, I'm just kind of like,
Yeah.
At heart, he's only out for his own best interest because he wants to run for president. So I find him very disingenuous. That's what I think is the problem that I have with him.
Yeah, for sure. I think, Newsom is definitely a better choice than Trump, for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's definitely someone who, needs to be held accountable. So like, as Californians, we definitely have to, stick up for, if he says he's going to fight for, the LGBTQIA plus community and doesn't, or if he's going to, stand up to big corporations, he needs to do it. But yeah, I feel like this whole ICE situation is almost like they're purposely going to these big ticket events or places to where it is going to cause a big stir and mass hysteria just so Trump could bring in the National Guard, just so Trump could, declare martial law. Um, and the other thing is, I mean, we're having Trump talking about arresting Gavin Newsom, arresting the mayor of LA just because they don't agree with him. And that is like completely unheard of.
Yeah.
So it's the amount of power that Trump thinks he has and probably would have is extremely frightening. I think, all we can do is what's being done is just, protesting. I believe I've seen a couple different numbers thrown around. I think the highest one I saw estimated was like 12.5 million people across the country participated. And I believe there's supposed to be a second one on July 4th.
Okay. Yeah, I did see that. They're gonna. Yeah, I'm not sure on the numbers either. I don't trust any numbers these days, but um, it was happened to be on the same day that Trump had his birthday slash military parade. And I know there's some controversy around that because they're like, oh, it's not for his birthday, it's for the Army's birthday. But it's like, okay, well, when's the Navy's birthday? When's the Air Force's birthday? Are we having a parade for them too? Like, when have we ever had a military parade for any of the different military, So it was fun watching his military parade suck ass because, like, it was hardly anyone there. And did you see that they caught Fox News trying to make it look like there was more people there? And they totally so they edited clips to make it seem like there were more people there than actually were. So they had like the normal clip, they had the Fox News clip. I wish I could put up visuals so people could see. But I think this was actually a TikTok video, but I saw it on YouTube. So they had regular news version, they had Fox News version, and when he started like speaking or came up to a podium, Fox News added in applause. And like it was much like it was like loud, like people were applauding. And then the regular one, it was like almost silent. There was hardly anyone doing anything. And I'm like, if that's not propaganda, I don't know what is. Like, that's something Trump would sue any other network for. But for him, nope, it's fine.
Yeah,
it's fine. But I know a lot of people are, especially on the right, they're like, oh, cool, we had the No King's Day. That doesn't make sense because if he was a king, then you wouldn't even be allowed to protest. Like, oh, enjoy your right to protest and your free speech for your king.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's the fact that it's not like he's a king yet. It's just like the little steps he's taking, like by the week, that are more and more authoritative is basically what people are trying to point out. It's like, it doesn't happen overnight. It's like that analogy where there's the frog where, if you put it in boiling water, it'll jump out. But if you start in cold and then, turn up the heat and then it slowly comes to a boil, it'll just let itself like boil to death. And it's just kind of like, that's potentially what could happen. I think that's what people are trying to point out. We're not being like, oh yeah, he's a king or a dictator right now. It's like he's making these little moves that are kind of slowly going up to that direction. And people who've studied history or people who've studied cults or etc. are looking at it like, this is how it fucking starts. You got to pay attention. And so on one end, you're like, oh, we're not there, so we don't want to like worry and make a big deal out of things and overreact. But at the same time, I'm sure there's a lot of people, how did Hitler come into power?
Yeah.
And probably looking back, they saw little signs that they just ignored. So
it took years. It took years for Hitler to amass what he did. So like there's definitely major similarities to how Hitler started his campaigning and building his cult basically, to what Trump is doing.
Yeah. Yeah. So the No Kings protest was a hit, and it was hilarious because there was a lot of popular commentators on the right saying the same thing about how the protests were a dud and no one showed up. And I'm like, you will say absolutely anything because your base will just believe it and not research it. Or they're in an echo chamber and they only follow, people who share their opinion. So they only see that side of things and they know that. So that's why they put those things out. They know it's not true, but that's exactly why they're putting it out there. My dog is doing, oh, she's on the ground, like scratching her back. I'm like, that's not distracting. She's just grunting. I'm like, that is not me.
I thought that was like your stomach. You're like hungry.
No, it's just literally Carly scratching her back on the carpet. Um, but yeah, so you have to be careful. You have to make sure you're following people from both sides of things, so you're not in an echo chamber. But it was definitely not a dud. Not only were they protesting in lots of places throughout the United States, but what they also didn't tell you is that people in other countries were also protesting. And of course, we don't see that. So you have to watch other news stations from other countries or BBC or whatever, or follow people on social media that are in other countries. And there was a cool thread where someone was like, people in other countries, how are you reacting to, or like, what are you being told about the protests that us in the United States are not seeing? And a lot of them were like, we've been protesting too. Or they're like, we're so proud of you, and all this stuff. And their news has covered it basically in a way that, anything outside of Fox News would cover it. Like,
Yeah.
they know what we're protesting and why, and they joined in. So that was kind of cool to see.
Well, that's good. It's definitely good that it's we don't feel alone. That we haven't lost everyone's support.
Yeah, yeah. I think the hardest part is just making sure the protests stay peaceful. But I think Trump, wants them to escalate because that's what he wants to show the left as being, crazy and violent and stuff. So, but I think it went pretty well. I think it stayed pretty peaceful. There was only like a few incidents that I really heard about, and I think a lot of them were already, because of the Los Angeles situation, it was already being escalated from the National Guard and Marine stuff. But outside of that, it went pretty smooth. So that's good.
Yeah, I was seeing a lot of videos of, I don't know if it was ICE themselves or the National Guard, but I'm seeing a lot of videos of civilians getting hit like direct with those like rubber bullets, and which you're not supposed to. You're not supposed to aim directly at someone and shoot them. You're supposed to like aim at the floor and have it bounce up. So there's definitely a bad escalation of violence going on, which is yeah, it's not good.
No, definitely not. So speaking of violence, the assassination of Minnesota lawmaker Melissa Hortman. Did you hear anything about that at all? Or
Yeah, no, I heard about that when it happened. It was her and her husband, and then I believe another senator, and their spouse were also attacked, but I believe they both survived. Um, it, I mean, it's just absolutely, it's heartbreaking, that this is what our world is coming to. Um, I know that the senator who died, Melissa Hartman, she was very close with Tim Walz. Um, I mean, again, not surprised, but very disappointed when Trump said that, he didn't call Tim Walz to, check in with him, that he, you know, doesn't like him, so he doesn't care, which really sucks. Yeah. And obviously their deaths is horrific enough, but their dog was also murdered.
Yeah, they're like golden retriever. Who does that?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's, it just leaves me speechless with the thought of someone targeting you coming to your home. Like, I don't like Trump, but I also wouldn't wish him and his family to get assassinated. Assassinated.
I would wish for that.
I don't want him to be
Assassinate.
president. I'd like to see him behind bars for a lot of the things, but I wouldn't wish him or his family physical harm. Um, and so it's the fact that yeah, I just can't imagine what that family's going through. You worked so hard to do something right, and to have someone, we're building up so much anger in this country from whichever side. I feel like it's happening kind of on both sides now, but especially the MAGA side, and that incitement into violence and that justification of violence is so profound in the Trump administration that I'm honestly surprised that this hasn't happened more yet, or we haven't heard more of it. But um, yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I just think the political violence is getting crazy. And like I said, like the division is creating political extremism. We're essentially becoming the Middle East, and that we are, you know, people are falling into extremism on both ends of things, and it resorts to things like violence. We had the Luigi situation, which both sides, there was definitely more unification on that one because of who it was and how many people are struggling with insurance and healthcare. So there was a lot of people that were like, not very like we shouldn't do that kind of thing on both sides. But this is a little different in that it was definitely politically motivated, and people are there's the right will not take responsibility for anything or even denounce it because they're too busy actually still blaming it on the left. They say that the guy who fired or who assassinated them was he was a Democrat, and he didn't like that they voted in line with what Trump wanted or something, and because he disagreed with whatever Melissa had voted on. That's why he targeted her and whoever else that voted in that direction. And they're saying that he was really close with Tim Walz, and Tim Walz hired him to be a hitman. And just all these things flying around instead of just denouncing it altogether. They immediately are like, oh, well, the left is violent, and they're the ones who, keep creating violence with the protests and Luigi, and they just keep supporting the violence. And I didn't see any Democratic leader when Trump was the situation with the ear. Everyone immediately, I'm not saying the voters because that's a different story, but the Democratic leaders immediately denounced it and said, like, this is, we do not want any violence. Being like, we don't want any assassinations. They were right on it immediately. And, Trump, no, I think at first he said something that was like, oh, okay. I'm surprised. But there's always follow up where they just dig themselves into these spaces where they just keep blaming the other side of things. And that's the thing that I feel like we need to stop doing and just be like, violence is not right, regardless of whatever side. And that's where I'm, still, Trump doesn't just have the job of, keeping us in and out of war with other countries. Like, his job is to keep us not in war with ourselves. And if he's like the president of peace, he would be actively working on that. And he just is not. He forgets that, what goes on in our country is also just as important. So there's just a lot of this rhetoric that is still creating a big divide among Americans. And I think people are in this. Uh, I think people feel like we don't have any control. You can't even vote. You feel like your vote doesn't count. It feels impossible, and then I think people are just kind of resorting to things like violence, unfortunately. But yeah.
Yeah, and I just double checked. It does look like he was a registered Republican. Um, and his friends and acquaintances described him as a Trump supporter with high conservative beliefs. Um,
He was
I
actually a
just,
pastor too.
yeah, yeah. And I think it's just, there's definitely just a lot of violent rhetoric going around, especially, especially from the MAGA side. I mean, I'm sure it's on both sides. There are people that, whatever. Um, but definitely on the MAGA side, there is a lot more justification of harming people. And I think, once, even with the, what was the guy's name that shot the insurance guy?
Luigi.
Luigi.
Yeah.
Um, you know, even the Luigi situation, you definitely can see, where his mind frame was or why he would do that if he's the one who did it. Obviously he's should be innocent until proven guilty. Um, but if you make justifications to that, it is a slippery slope. When it comes down to it, he did take someone's life. He did kill someone in cold blood. Um, and I think no matter what your justifications are, there should be a strong consequence for taking someone's life, especially if it's, if you're defending yourself, that's one thing, but, to go out and kill someone or kill someone and their spouse, um, it's, it's just, it's not okay, you know? But I think as, as society, we have to remember, and we have to, um, separate our thoughts and anger about what's going on in the world from the fact that there are people with families and lives, um and it shouldn't be something where we're just like, oh, they need to die. We need to be the better people, and have more empathy. um doesn't mean that someone shouldn't be in trouble or someone, doesn't need to face charges. Um, but definitely on either side, we shouldn't be jumping to just violence as a solution because it's not going to get us anywhere.
No, definitely not. And it's like, I get it. There's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of shit going on that we feel like we can't control. But again, violence isn't going to solve anything, unfortunately. And yeah, as far as we just have to realize there's going to be people that disagree with us. There's going to be people that maybe want to harm us or wish, ill harm against someone with opposing views or trans people or whatever. Most people want something bad to happen to trans people. But yeah, it sucks and it's exhausting sometimes being like, oh, I'm going to be the bigger person because you just want to like fight back and be like, fuck you, but again, it doesn't solve anything. And that's kind of what I brought up with, like last episode, whereas, on both sides, there's commentators, right, left, where there's more of this, like, we're focused on proving each other wrong versus, trying to work together. Because if you think, like, we're all in this together, guys, we're on the same fucking ship. Think of it, we're all on Titanic, and, we have to think of ways to get the boat to not sink. And unfortunately, we can't do that if we're just fighting all the time. And whatever happens to one party happens to another. Although it's, sometimes validating when people fuck around and find out because like they voted for Trump and then they get affected by it and then they're like, oh shit, I didn't know that was going to happen. But at the same time, it's like, you can't even be like, I told you so, because it affects us too. So it's like, I don't want Trump to fail because that means all of us fail. But it's just, I want I want the our country not to be so chaotic. I don't want there to be so much tension. There's like palatable tension just floating around the world right now. I mean, in our country, um, people are just at each other's throats, and it takes doesn't take much for things to escalate. Even shit about masks, like people freaking out on planes over masks has been a thing
Mhm.
that's just been floating around for a good amount of years now. Um, and I feel like that's where things really like we went crazy after COVID.
Yeah.
People lost their minds, so it's like we're still recovering from that. People, don't want to let go of a lot of things from COVID and blame it all on Democrats as far as masks and vaccinations and all that go. And just like, okay, well, can we somehow get along? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think moving on from that, we're on to our last main topic of the day, which is the Supreme Court ruling on gender affirming care. I actually don't know anything about this, so Cody, why don't you fill me in?
Yeah. So let's see. Yeah. So the Supreme Court, Court 6-3 ruling, United States versus Schmetti, upheld Tennessee's ban on puberty blockers and hormones for trans minors, affecting 118,300 trans youth across 27 states. So the majority called it non-discriminatory. Dissenters called it devastating. Trump's executive order 14187 also bans federal funding for care under 19. Um, yeah. So basically, unfortunately, it's devastating for trans youth or those who, um, you know, need care, healthcare. And I know that puberty blockers and hormones for trans youth is very controversial, even on both sides. There's definitely people on the left who are a little bit skeptical of it. Not as much so on the right. I think there's even people within the trans community that are a bit divided on transitioning young. Um, and I gotta say, like, I don't have a concrete answer or opinion on it because I don't think that banning a straight ban of anything is ever a good idea because there's always going to be, yeah, everyone's different, right? And I feel like it needs to be evaluated on a case by case basis, not just a sweeping ban of it. And I can't, there's definitely arguments I see of why it shouldn't be allowed, but then I also personally know it was something I probably would have benefited from if I was able to transition, not have to go through female puberty. Holy shit, that would just, it would save me so much hardship and trauma, save me from having a surgery, not needing, top surgery, that sort of thing. So like there are a lot of benefits for those who, the decision is the right thing for. And I can't imagine just stripping that option. I mean, it wasn't an option for us because it just wasn't a thing. But
Yeah,
if it
the knowledge
was,
wasn't out
holy
there.
shit. Yeah, like I'd be begging my parents. I would be doing everything to get what I needed. Um, and so it's just kind of sad to think that it's come to just a straight up ban of it. But yeah, what are your thoughts?
No, I completely agree. I think, I'm also in the mindset of, I don't know what the right answer is. I also would have probably had a much better youth, yeah, if I was able to either have puberty, at least have puberty blockers, but be able to start hormones or, whatever I needed to feel better in my body at that age. I kind of, from the moment that I started puberty, I was very before puberty, I was very active. I was in sports. I was very social. And when puberty started, I definitely like shut off from the world. I stopped playing sports. I stopped, really hanging out with a lot of people and wanting to go places because I was so uncomfortable. And so I think about, I probably would have had a better high school life. I would have had a better middle school life. But also the times were different. The the knowledge of trans people, wasn't, I didn't know about trans people, and so it also would have been a societal thing where probably transitioning in school wouldn't have been a very acceptable thing. As I have siblings who are just graduated high school and one that's still in high school, and they talk about how like it is more widely acceptable. Obviously, you've still got people who think old ways, but it's definitely a different environment now. So yeah, I would have loved to, been able to do that. But I also know that there is a reality where, while it is, a smaller percentage, there is a reality of people who have tried to transition, started transition, and then realized that it's not for them, and then have to detransition. And I'm sure the effects that has on the body is probably rough. Detransitioning. I don't know. Again, we're not experts. I can only talk about my truth and my life and my feelings. So I don't know what, someone who has gone through that, what was their mind frame when they thought they were trans and wanting to transition. Was it something where did they feel the same way that I felt and then it changed, or is it something where, you know, uh, someone just thinking, oh, that's the answer to, why I feel the way I feel, that must be it, and then, I don't know. um I definitely think there needs to be um, stronger ways of catching that and preventing that from happening. I, again, don't know what that is, but I don't think banning gender affirming care for youth is the right choice. I can see putting, higher stipulations or making sure that, like, there's a lot more steps you have to go through, um, or at least being able to do puberty blockers for someone. But yeah, I don't have the real answers, unfortunately. But I also, there's also the fear of, it's starting with youth, but we're already seeing, where states are trying to push to where it's just everyone. So again, another slippery slope of, we're aiming it towards the kids because that's what's going to get a lot of support, and then we're going to flip it, and then it's going to be no trans people at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, in Trump's bill, I basically that, adults are included, and he wants to ban federal funding for surgery for any trans individual, adults or youth, which is, basically pushing us back to about, 2012, where insurance didn't cover anything trans related. But that really definitely hurts the trans community, because we don't have a lot of money. It still costs money to have surgeries, even if you have insurance, co-pays and out of pocket fees and stuff like that. But
Yeah, I didn't have insurance cover my top surgery. I had
yeah,
to.
me either. Yeah.
That was a hard thing to put money aside for.
Yeah, for sure. It wasn't easy. And it's just like, some could argue, well, that creates a barrier for people, and if they really want it, they'll work for it and they'll get it done. That's what that's the amount of gatekeeping that we need. But it's just like, not necessarily, because there's also people that don't make it. Not to emphasize the potential of suicide, because I feel like that's kind of overemphasized sometimes. But I just know personally how hard it was. And I don't want everyone to have to struggle because I had to struggle. Like, I still think there needs to be things in place like therapy and maybe a waiting period or something. But I still think it should be covered by insurance because it's a health issue.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So, yeah, I definitely know I would give almost anything to relive my childhood or youth days as me. Like, I think about what high school would be like if I had been able to transition and not go through female puberty, And although I kept playing sports, that's all I did. Like, uh, socially, I also withdrew and felt so uncomfortable. I even felt a lot more comfortable, in sports, post puberty than pre. Like, I didn't even think about gender, like pre puberty. I like thought I was a boy.
Mhm.
So it was just, didn't think about it and then had to think about it because your body just gives you a reality check.
Yeah.
And puberty blockers are a pause button. And so to ban those, I feel like is doing a disservice to people, because that is one way that you can buy people time to really explore, have therapy, transition socially, and see if it's the right thing for them. So by removing that pause button, there's going to be permanent effects either way. Either they're going through the wrong puberty, um, you know, or not. So I'm just like, the puberty blockers thing, I feel like is not a great decision.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Anywho, should we move on to what we're watching, or what's in our feed that we're
Sure.
you know,
Have
what
a
have you
have a
been
little bit more
watching?
of a lighthearted. I've been on the King of the Hill train, so that's kind of been my wife and I. Well, I'll take a step from that. We've been back on The Handmaid's Tale, so we're watching that, and then we finish out our night with a couple episodes of King of the Hill. So that way,
Lighten it
that's
up a
not the
little
last
bit.
thing. Yeah, so that's not the last thing we're seeing before we go to bed. But yeah, no, I can't remember if we talked about King of the Hill last episode. I think we did, because we talked about the actor who was murdered. But
Yeah.
yeah, I had always seen it on TV, because it's one of those shows that like plays on Fox every night at like 5 or 6 p.m. or whatever. And I never really thought it was funny. And now that I'm older and watching it, I find it absolutely hilarious. So no, it's been great. I'm excited that it's coming back. So yeah, no, that's what we've been watching: King of the Hill, Handmaid's Tale, and then I've been listening to this podcast called Serialously, which is like a true crime podcast, but the host, she's been following the Karen Reed trial. So I've been listening to that, and I think probably the highlight of my week was finding out that Karen Reed was acquitted of murder charges. That's been something that I've been kind of following for the last 2 years, I believe. So that was definitely a big, something went right. Um, and then everything went downhill after that. But at least something went right for right now. Yeah. So what have you been watching?
Yeah. So, I mean, I watched her little documentary not too long ago as well, and I saw that little blip in the headlines. It was just like a tiny little blip because everything else is exploding. So I was like, oh, cool. I know she still got charged with like reckless driving or
Yeah.
something, though.
Yeah.
It's like, well, she didn't get off completely, but anyways.
At least she doesn't have to do
So
jail time.
right, yeah. I think she's probably been through enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, so uh, we we finished Handmaid's Tale, and that was great. But I won't do any spoilers for you. But we also we end basically every night with Seinfeld, because we tend to watch intense shit, and then we're like, all right, we're gonna end it with a little something lighthearted. So Seinfeld is our king of the hill. But yeah, so we watched The Better Sister with what's her name? Justin Timberlake's wife.
Oh, Jessica Biel.
Yes, I remember her name. Yeah, she's attractive. So that was really good. I wasn't really. I don't know. I didn't have any expectations because
Mhm.
I don't know. It just popped up on Amazon, and we didn't have anything else to watch, and we started it, and it was actually very good. So if you're looking for something that's, you know, uh, it's very attention, grabbing, because you're like, what is happening? Who did it? Blah blah blah. I love those types of shows. And then now we're watching a show called Dark Matter. So we just started that, and it's an Apple TV one, and and so far it looks really good. Like anything that has to do with different dimensions and shit, I just really like, because I'm like, what if it's real?
Speaking of different dimensions, my wife and I were just talking about last night that we need to rewatch the OA.
Oh, that was such a good one.
And I saw an interview, I think 2 weeks ago, with Jason Isaacs, and he was talking about he just got together with Britt Marlin and one of the other writers, and they are dedicated to bringing it back. So I really hope that happens, because it left on such a cliffhanger, and I loved it. Yeah.
Yeah, like I know like the movements were cheesy and cringe as fuck, but the whole storyline was amazing and everything around it was great. I think I saw somewhere where they were trying to pitch it to Hulu to pick it up or something, because Netflix wouldn't. But yeah, that would be amazing if they were able to keep it going, because I need to keep watching it. I need to know what happens. But yeah, so those are the ones we've been watching recently. Watched a documentary. I think it's called The Volcano. I like to watch documentaries to go to sleep too, but this one I found it too interesting, so I didn't go to sleep. But it's about this. I mean, multiple people. They went to this island in New Zealand that is basically, I think it was supposed to be a dormant volcano, but it erupted as they were touring it. And so it went through their story of, how they either survived, people didn't survive too. But it was so good because a lot of the filming, they might as well have had a camera crew with them, because, we have cell phones and they're touring. So they're recording everything. Yeah. So you get a lot of actual footage of what happened. It's not like other documentaries where they have to do like recreations. There's like a lot of it was what had happened and what they were recording. But very unfortunate. There's this couple that just got married. They were on their honeymoon. And this is what happened on their honeymoon. And so it just goes, through their story. And it's just a nightmare. I will never get close to a volcano willingly, especially if there's a chance of eruption. But they closed the island now for people. No one can go on there because of that, which they shouldn't have allowed anyone on it to begin with. But imagine basically being steamed to death, because it's not one of the volcanoes that, is like a lava situation. Different type, but it's like steam and yeah. So like they were burned even through their clothes and stuff, because it's steam. So just a nightmare situation. And a lot of people like were up there with families. So like either a whole family's died, part of families died. But it's really interesting if you want to watch a real horror movie.
Yeah. There's a documentary that's on our watch list, but it's the one about the Titan submersible. I don't know if you've seen that one yet.
I watched that too, yeah.
How was that one?
It was good. There's actually 2. There's one on Amazon and there's one on Netflix. They're both good. But that guy was insane. Like just everything. There's all these signs pointing that this was going to happen. He just ignored it. And there's people trying to blow the whistle, trying to be like, dude, no, don't do it. Like there's people who quit over it. And, ultimately it happened and he died because of it. But he dragged some other more, innocent people along with him, unfortunately. And how that ended.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah. No, so it's definitely on my watch list.
Yeah, watch it. It's good. So
yeah. I will check that out.
I think that's all
probably
I can think of.
Yeah. That's probably enough doom for one scroll. I'm sure we probably talked. If the 2 listeners that we have are like, okay, this is getting too much.
Like, can you shut up now, please? Thanks. Yeah. All right, we'll shut up. We'll stop with the doom scroll. We'll be, back next week with some more. But if anyone else has any doom scrolling topics, or whatever, if you want to just add to what we already talked about, let us know your opinion. Do that in the comments. That would be greatly appreciated. Love to read your opinions on things. If you
make sure to follow us on Instagram.
Yes, we have an Instagram, and it is at Doom Scroll Club Podcast. So make sure to give us a follow there, and subscribe on YouTube and Spotify so you don't miss an episode. And hey, if you like what you listen to, go ahead and give us a share, because that helps us out. Because so we have more than just you listening to us right now. Not saying that we don't appreciate you. It's just
you are important.
Yes, you matter. You're enough.
Yes. We love you.
Yes. So show us some love back and share this podcast. Yeah. So yeah, any last words, Calvin?
Thank you for joining the DSC. Yeah, we dealt with military strikes, political assassinations, and a dog that died that shouldn't have died. So let's just have a little more empathy. I think last week was not what was our theme last week? It was like not jumping to assumptions.
Yeah.
I think this week is let's have a little bit of empathy, and let's be there for one another. And
yeah,
we'll see you next time.
Peace out.